To me, this is still one of the most bizarre yet amazing stories in biology. The capacity for these tiny parasites to just drastically manipulate the host that they use is just tremendous. And thousands of these parasites, they're moving through and they're looking for amphibians. And when they find them, they'll burrow in, which ultimately leads to a limb that's twisted in all kinds of strange knots. You're kind of horrified by the severity of these deformities you see. What is this and how is this happening? And how are the biological interactions that underlie this so powerful? And really an opportunity where no matter what the answer was, it was going to be an interesting story. There's two more. It was right about that time that people were starting to report deformed frogs in Minnesota, and school kids finding large numbers of animals with missing, malformed, misshapen limbs. And soon after, we had a local property owner not far away from Stanford report finding large numbers, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of deformed frogs coming out of the ponds in that area.
How many kilos did you guys get?
I had really no idea what was causing the deformities. There's a kind of standard mix of suspects that people talked about. So we were interested in things like pesticides, UVB penetration, or heavy metals, parasites. And so with the help of a few friends trying to sample more ponds throughout the counties, and the only place where we found these deformed frogs was where there was a very particular type of snail. And so we started to think, okay, this snail is clearly an important player, and can we bring those into the laboratory and really start to zero in on exactly what was going on? And the reason why snails are so critical, of course, is because they actually are hosts for lots of worm parasites. We thought, okay, we want to test the role of these parasites, which are coming out of snails. We were using a very small number of parasites, exactly what you'd be finding in nature in most of these ponds. And even at those low dosages, the types of abnormalities that were produced, extra limbs, missing limbs, skin webbings, misshapen limbs, that experiment showed us that we were able to reproduce that full range of deformities that you see in the field. The parasite is a trematode or a flatworm that have these complex life cycles. So they're not able to survive in only one host alone. They actually have to use multiple host species. And what the parasites do is they take over a snail and they essentially turn that snail into a giant parasite production factory. And thousands of these parasites swim out from the snail. They're moving through and traversing that pond and they're looking for amphibians. And when they find them, they'll burrow in right around the developing limbs, which ultimately leads to the limb failing to develop, or you get a limb that's twisted in all kinds of strange knots. And the presumption is that they're easy pickings for predators. So something like a bird is going to swoop down, eat them. The bird actually then gets infected by the parasite. And then as the bird flies around to other ponds, parasite eggs are getting dropped into ponds across the landscape. It's a mixture of sort of horror and amazement at the same time. You're kind of horrified by the severity of these deformities you see, but amazed and even humbled a bit by the power of this parasite and what it's actually able to do. It turned out that a lot of the things tackling at the beginning were in some ways the easy questions, trying to say, how strong is this link between parasite infection and deformities? But since then, the question that really has become where and why? Why do we see some years or some sites or some species showing up with so many malformations and others not? What are those drivers that actually cause the infection to become abundant or to emerge? So while we started out with an interest in frogs, where it's led me in terms of scientific questions is really an interest in the ecology of infectious disease. So many of the diseases that society and that wildlife face today are these complex diseases. It's not about an interaction between, say, a single host species and a single parasite. Instead, the dynamics of that infection really depend on a broad range of ecological interactions involving multiple different species. And what this means is that you've really got to have a broader understanding of the ecological community and even the ecosystem if you want to go ahead and predict, possibly even prevent some of these diseases from spreading.